Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
And we are recording. Arden Leigh, welcome to Weird Web Radio. It is awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Lonnie. It is a pleasure.
Great to hear that. I do want to apologize to you and anyone listening if I sound stuffy or anything or losing my voice. It's because I am. So I've been battling something for 3 weeks and I'm at the end of it, but it keeps trying to take my voice away from me. We're going to do our best. If at any point I sound weird during the course of this show, you can always listen to it on YouTube and hit, captions, and you can read what my microphone is picking up. Hopefully we don't come to that. Arden, the first thing I want to do is kind of go over a little bit of your background for people who may not know who you are. I didn't find like an official bio for you. I found some different things, so I just went to your website where I could find more up-to-date information and really got the idea that you're the creator, facilitator of the Repatterning Project. You've got a band, Arden and the
correct.
Wolves. I love that fucking name, by the way. A history and hypnosis and NLP, as all my listeners know. So do I. You're really into magic, seeking the mysteries thereof, and even say you are the magical heir to Grant Morrison. Interesting way to say that. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, I am indeed. Thank you.
First thing I like to start with for the people who have not been here before. Have you ever experienced a haunting or anything that we would call paranormal phenomena? Like the weird sort of stuff that happens around that kind of thing.
Oh gosh, what's so funny to me is that I feel like my point of reference is so skewed because I talk to spirits literally every day. So It's, at this point I'm like, yeah, just last night, but it's, it's not, it was only at a certain point in my practice that I was able to detect entity interference, let's say, which is what we would think of as a haunting. So
Okay.
I don't have any great stories about like ghost knocking things off my shelves. I do have a friend who had a story about that recently. My friend Sal, who owns The Crooked Path, which is a magical occult retail shop and education center in California. Like just flat out caught it on video, like a vase just knocking off the shelf out of nowhere, like nothing appearing to cause that. But for me, it's more like, what happens lately is I'll be divining, and I divine almost every day. I'm in communication with my spirits almost every day. And while I know there are a lot of occult practitioners who will communicate directly, like through psychism, like they just know what their spirits are saying.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as someone with ADHD, there's too much of a possibility of intrusive thought. So I like to use the cards and pendulum just to make sure that I'm clear on the messages that I'm getting. And I'm always, even when I pull cards, I use a pendulum to confirm, did I pull the right cards? Are they in the right order? And once I interpret them, I'm like, am I right about what you mean by this card? When you say this card, are you talking about this person or that person or whatever? So when I experience interference lately, normally what happens, it comes in the form of my divinations being messed with. And I can tell this because sometimes the pendulum will even start swinging in patterns that I don't recognize. I'm at the point now where different spirits that I talk to, I can sometimes even tell who's who by the way that the pendulum swings, by the force with which it swings, the pace at which it swings. And so there'll be times that I'll be divining, and all of a sudden it'll be like I'm getting one answer, everything is normal, and then all of a sudden, oh, no, that's not what's happening. Pull more cards. It's this. We think you should do this. And I'm like, no, my spirits would never in a million years tell me this. So in that case, I'm going to go straight to apotropaic fumigation, right? Like burning dried herbs in order to, basically tell them to get lost. I've got a singing bowl over here on my shelf. I clang it really loudly that often, you know, and I'll just be like, listen, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Like, I know you're here. I know you're not my actual spirits talking to me. You're not supposed to be here. If I got to go run a whole ritual bath and say a bunch of Psalms and come out and do like, 3 egg cleanses in a row, I'm going to be pissed. You can leave now.
I love that.
And it depends. Sometimes I got to do that ritual bath and call in my angels and say, no, we're banishing this guy or whatever. And sometimes they do leave. It's funny. There was an occultist who was glamoring a divination. I'm almost certain they had no idea who I was personally, but there was magic. Gosh, short version of the story is there was magic that I had done for a just outcome a while back. And there was a person who was trying to undo some of that. And they didn't know who I was personally, but they knew that there was another magician in the way of the outcome that they were trying for. And so they hired a professional occultist, if my divination is correct, to glamour all of my divinations, as in like the interfering magician or the one they were trying to interfere with or whatever, to say something so it would throw me off course. And I was just like, and the funny thing was, like, there was a point in time at which like that situation was over, mostly because I won. And I was able to even tell the entity, like, look into this. You're not for hire anymore. This whole situation has shifted and transmuted. Go ahead, take a look. This is no long. You're out of a job. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you got laid off and they didn't let you know. And sure enough, like, as soon as I said that, it was gone and my divinations were back to normal. So honestly, that is my experience with paranormal activity, is that it's only something that I could really pick up with now, about a decade of study under my belt.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not the most sensational story, but
quite a good one. I guess where I want to start with that is, you say you experience spirits every day. You kind of joke, oh, you mean last night?
Yeah.
So when you say you're experiencing spirits, let's unpack that a little bit for the people listening who think they are too, but they're not sure. Are you seeing them, as well as you see you and I can see each other now? Or are you more sensing them? Like, what is the actual experience for you?
I have perceived spirits when I've done this year. I've been working my way through the Ars Almadel, which is, I like to think of it as like baby's first grimoire. It's like, it's probably one of the easiest grimoires out there to do. It's like, 30 minutes every Sunday, and you're summoning angels, so for those who make that big specification between angels and demons, and I do at this point in my own practice, just because I think there's different protocols to deal with in each. And so in that grimoire, it calls for a crystal stone, quote unquote, a crystal ball, to sit atop these tablets that you make in these various colors to call these spirits. And you're supposed to ask the spirit to appear in a way that is perceptible to the eye. And the first time that I did the Almadel was the first time that I saw the image of a spirit in the crystal ball. So I'm not someone who, and I know there are people out there that are like that it's like, oh, I go somewhere and I can immediately see there's a spirit in the corner over here, or, oh my gosh, there's a child who passed away and needs help passing. I was going to with a friend to Disneyland one day, and we're like walking to the tram, and she's like, oh gosh, there's a child I need to help pass over. And I'm like, it's our day off, right? So I'm not like one of those folks, but with some practice, I've been able to perceive spirits in a scrying device, such as a crystal ball. But when they appear to me normally, it's often I will get the message that they want to work with me either through synchronicity or through, let's say, another occult colleague, either saying, someone who maybe perceives spirits even more than I do, who's able to receive that message and is like, oh, Arden, this spirit wants to work with you. You should, divine with them. And at that point, I use my cards and my pendulum and I call them right in. Or I'll start talking about working with a spirit, and then all of a sudden they'll start showing up. So I'll be using my pendulum And for me, when I use a pendulum, I have my yes, I have my no, and I have like a yes and or a kinda or look for more information. And when I know that a spirit is trying to get my attention, whether it's the spirit that I'm talking to that wants to talk about something else that I'm not perceiving, or if there's another spirit who's like, hey, I have a message for it. One of the primary spirits I'm working with lately is Anael, Archangel of Venus. And I could be divining with, anyone else. And all of a sudden I keep getting that like, yes, and yes, and yes, and. I'm like, is this Anael with a message for me? And she's like, yes. I'm like, okay, can I finish this conversation first before? And she's like, yes, but I have no other way of telling you this other than your pendulum. So I'm someone who from the beginning, my primary mode of noticing contact from the other side has mainly been through synchronicity. And I think in some ways because, I am someone who grew up with gaslighting, someone who grew up with, abuse and the kind of, the kind of like, you're not experiencing what you're actually experiencing kind of a thing. I think on some level, I'm also autistic, so I have a really great knack for pattern recognition. I notice a lot of things. So I think my spirit's kind of sensed, like, hey, if we're going to get this girl to actually believe the things that she's experiencing, she needs signs that she can point to in reality. And it would be like when I was first starting my practice about 10 years ago, I had friends who were skeptics. I would say most of my friends were skeptics of some kind because I wasn't practicing yet. So I wasn't around all those kinds of folks. And to have, say 2 images or 2 things appear in reality that I could take a photo of or a screenshot of and be like, no, I saw this, and I saw this. Or like this card came up and the artwork on this oracle card is the exact same as the artwork on this album that also, something like that. And then they'd be like, oh, wow, like that actually really is uncanny. So that is typically the way that I have. Yeah. But now that I divine more often, now they just kind of interrupt me.
That's cool. I want to backtrack, I guess, because it's come up a couple times as you've talked. You've said a few times when you got started 10 years ago. So this isn't something that's been a part of your whole life. What was the catalyst? What made you aware of magic, for one, and two, that yes, it's real, it should be a part of my life?
Yeah, I was living in New York until up about that time. And I was in I was in a lifestyle or surrounded by people where I knew by the time I moved out that I had taken my sort of left brain masculine side about as far as I could go. And I was into NLP then. I've got my hypnosis certifications then. And for some reason, like those, keep in mind, this was like, this was like pre-Me Too. This was a very different world that we were living in. To me back then, it was an unsafe thing to be feminine in ways that were easily ridiculed or dismissed. And so I became sort of hyper masculine there. And I dismissed a lot of, and I'm not saying that like men can't also practice magic or whatever, but there certainly is, or was anyway, in the circles that I was running in at that time, there was this sort of, that's a bunch of hogwash or whatever. And so I just, for fear of, it's like the men around me acted, like astrology is dumb or whatever. And girls just like believe, and so I conformed in many ways to the ways of being that I felt were going to keep me safe. And that meant dismissing much of the occult. I had sort of, I had a couple of instances where it'd be like, oh, I'd light a candle or something and something would happen. So there was something in me that knew like, oh, there's something here. But when I moved out to Los Angeles, I moved out with the intention of resensitizing. I was losing my sense of feeling, both physically and emotionally, because desensitization is something that can happen to us with complex trauma. And I realized I was like, there are certain like buttons or switches in me that just aren't working. It's like I've had this image of like a switchboard and the switches are all just like dead. Like I can't feel certain things. So I moved out to Los Angeles with that intention. I think it's interesting because even I didn't even really fully realize the power of intention setting alone. I had no idea what this would look like. But I moved out to Los Angeles, and honestly, I started going to some occult classes, mostly because I knew that I needed a social circle. You know, I was like, I need to, all right, I just moved here. I know a couple people or whatever, but I need to do stuff. You know, I need to start just putting some sort of roots down, finding some hobbies, friends, places to hang out. And I started going to a few different classes, but the one I ended up resonating with was at the Green Man store in North Hollywood, which still exists today. And I don't go to a lot of classes there anymore, but I'm really grateful for the start that I got there, because I think that was my first encounter with folks who were real practitioners and were conveying something of extraordinary value. And I just started noticing that after I would go to those classes, I would feel really good. In my quest to resensitize myself, I downloaded this app called Mood Meter. And I still teach this. You know, I still recommend in the Repatterning Project, I still recommend, you know, download Mood Meter or find some kind of mood tracking, because you will be shocked that the things that you think make you happy actually might be dysregulating you, and the things that you think are just whatever actually might be the things that, you know, are helping you feel calm and safe. And so I would notice like, oh, actually, like the guy that I have a big crush on or whatever that I've been, you know, pursuing, and we've been back and forth with all this sort of intermittent reinforcement, I actually feel terrible after I spend time with him. And where I actually feel good is after I go to these witchcraft classes that I thought I was going to, just so I wouldn't be like the clingy girl hanging on to the guy that she likes out here, that I have a social life of my own. And it turns out I'm actually a lot happier doing those things. So I started pursuing things. I started casting sigils. I watched my teacher Grant's disinformation keynote from the year 2000. It's a 45-minute video on YouTube for anyone listening. Anyone listening, if you have not listened to that 45-minute talk, oh my goodness. I mean, that it took me years to understand everything in that 45 minutes, but it was such an opening and such an awakening for me. So sure enough, just as Grant advises in that video, I started casting sigils. And one of the first sigils I cast, and I kind of took it as a sort of like gray area permission. Like Grant was being like, you know, don't just sit here, listen to my bullshit, you know, go home and do it, and we will change the world. And I was like, okay, well, fine. Then I want to have lunch with Grant Morrison, right? I'm not going to like go casting some crazy compulsory stuff. But I was like, you said that. All right, fine. Then I want to have lunch with you. The worst that could happen is you'll be bored for an hour. And sure enough, 10 months later, I ended up meeting Grant through a mutual friend, Alan Amato, who is a photographer. And Alan had a dinner with Grant that he was going to, and was like, I think Grant would really like to meet you. You should come along with us. And sure enough, then 10 months following that, Grant ended up hitting me up because they were seeking some sort of consultation, like NLP and BDSM and pickup artistry kind of stuff, which was like, that was like my 20s. There was like a triangle of those three things. To consult on the Wonder Woman comic they were working on at the time. And sure enough, I wrote back and I was like, yeah, like how long are you in town for? And Grant was like, well, I'm leaving tomorrow evening, but I'm free tomorrow afternoon. Why don't we have lunch? So there I was. And it's like, it's only so often that you can cast these spells or sigils and notice that changes are happening in your reality before you suddenly realize, oh, I don't have room to complain about anything anymore, because I now have a method by which I can fix things. This means I am actually responsible for my reality. Maybe I was not before when I didn't realize this. I don't think, you know, I'm not into the whole like victim blaming kind of thing or whatever, but it's like, yeah, we create our reality when we wake up to the fact that we can. But like once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I was like, well, I guess I have a responsibility to fix my life. At this point. So that's what I did, and that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
I love that. since Grant came up, I am curious, how do you go from having lunch with Grant Morrison to getting into a relationship of mentor student where you're saying, you're the magical heir to Grant Morrison? You just don't hear people say things like that very often. For one, because I've taken courses with Jason Miller and Jack Grail and I can go on and on. The courses I've enjoyed and expanded my own experiences. It would never occur to me to say that I was their magical heir. But I'm also not just the one studying with them. I'm really just really curious. I've never seen Grant selling the course. I've seen like that video you referenced. That's probably countless people's gateway into the occult and magic. Yeah. It's got to be
so good.
way back in the 90s, early I don't know. I'm looking at it on my bookshelf, The Book of Lies that Disinfo put out years and years ago. Grant has an essay in there called I think it's called Pop Magic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
I have that literally like on my shelf right next to me.
Yeah, it's sitting right there on my top shelf of chaos magic stuff.
Yep.
So, Grant's been a part of my life too. I've always enjoyed his stuff. I like his approach. I like his storytelling approach to things. I've been a big fan of the Invisibles for a long time.
Yes. So
one thing I love that you have done for Grant, I think, is you're reintroducing him, maybe hopefully to a new audience and a new generation.
Oh my goodness. I'm honored by you saying that. Thank you. I've always thought of like Grant as introducing me.
Yeah. All due respect to Grant. I told you earlier, I watched the episode of your show with him and you were absolutely as interesting as he was. So don't sell yourself short on that. But I am curious, you went from, I want to have lunch with Grant Morrison to becoming Grant Morrison's student in the occult arts. How does that happen?
Well, when I started consulting on their Wonder Woman, they basically approached me as like sort of a trade. Like this wasn't like a paid consultation, and I didn't need it to be, because honestly, like bartering for Grant's magical knowledge is something that you can't put a price on. So Grant was basically like, if you have any questions about magic, I'd be happy to make sure that this is a reciprocal kind of a consultation. And Grant also at one point asked me to do a spell for their lost cat. Grant has a lot of cats up in Scotland, many who roam the property that they live on, and several who were in the house. And there was a cat that he had become, quite attached to, as we do, who had run away and was not seen. And Grant was like, I'm really too worried that I'm in my feelings about it to do a really clean, like, I have lust for result, you don't, can you do this spell for me? And I was like, oh my God. I was like the stakes were so high. I think I still have a picture of that spell somewhere, like a sigil. And the cat was a black cat that had a twin. And I had these two black cat bookends. So it was like, I'm going to put these two black cat bookends with this candle and this sigil for the cat to be able to return home safely, almost kind of like drawing the two siblings back together. And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, the cat returned. So it kicked off like that. And then I was the one who suggested it, partly because, I wanted, I guess I was interested in the idea of, Grant's written so many remarkable essays and has woven their magic like through their comics work, through their fiction writing, and has also given several really great talks and interviews that you can find online, but there's not like a body of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also admit there was a part of me that was also kind of acting out of a fear of, like, I was a pickup artist in my 20s, right? Like, and I, that's when before we started recording, we were talking about, books I had written. I wrote a dating book called The New Rules of Attraction. And I was kind of framed in the media. I mean, I was kind of, asking for it or whatever, but the media that likes to be sensationalist is like, oh, the seductress who can get anyone that she wants or whatever. And I was so worried about that sort of reputation following me that I was like, I don't want people thinking that I'm doing something shady either. So can we make this an apprenticeship? Because I want to have this friendship with you. I don't want to, and I don't want people creating some narrative around me that I'm being inappropriate with a man who's happily married. So that honestly, like some of that fear absolutely informed my asking that. Like, can I have an official title so that the thing that we're doing can be legitimate? And Grant came back with just this extraordinary, kind of organization of like, well, yeah, actually, let's go through the Kabbalic spheres. Let's all, give you some exercises, some reading to do and things. And, you come back and report your results. And so we began this kind of like epistolary back and forth that since then has really taken on a life of its own. Like, I don't think neither Grant nor I are kind of like in control of it anymore, that these sort of Kabbalic spheres, and, Grant's being, older and more experienced than me is higher up on the tree than I am. Like, so they're at a certain sphere in their own life. I'm at a certain Kabbalic sphere in my own life. And we're just like watching as all of these things happen. And sure enough, like Grant will still assign me reading, assign me things to do, certain magical exercises to try to hone my skills or to see what happens, and stuff happens. But it's just been this kind of wild magical journey. And my hope is, and I'm sure it will be a lifelong project, but my hope is that at the end of it, I can compile our letters and our writing and, edit it into something that is organized well and have the sort of like the Grant Morrison school of magic, so that other folks who want to go that way can also sort of follow in my steps, almost like a letters to a young poet kind of a style.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool that he's doing it that way. I like a structured approach, at least like I'm aiming for certain goals, and if we're going to give you these rails, to see what happens. I also like it when it turns a little feral too.
Yeah.
You mentioned like the whole pickup artist thing. I remember way years ago, just a sidetrack. Neil Strauss wrote a book called The Game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Neil Strauss was a buddy of mine back in the day. I mean, we're still cool, but we just haven't spoken in a long time.
Yeah, there's a line in that book that's the reason why I shaved my head. I started shaving my head a few years ago, remembering something Neil said in that book when I read it many years ago, saying balding's not a choice, but bald is.
Yep. Yeah, that was Mystery who said that in the book to Neil Strauss.
I thought it was Neil that said it. Well, I've given Neil credit for it, and I will.
Yeah. Well, he to be fair, he's the one who wrote it in the book. Yeah, but I think in that scene, it's Mystery who says that to him. And I dated Mystery for about 3 months back in the day too. It was probably the most chaotic 3 months of my life, but sometimes you got to find out.
Yeah.
You just got to find out.
It was I was a bartender forever in my adult life. If I wanted to meet somebody, I didn't have any problems meeting anybody. I was lucky in that regard.
I tend to bar a few years out of college too.
Yeah. And so through that era of my life, I was in a long-term relationships anyway, so it was fine. But I found them fascinating because they kept referencing communication styles. And I thought it was interesting, I still think they get kind of a bad rap because on the outside appearance, it looks what they're doing is kind of shady and wrong. But at the same time, they're taking people who are terribly uncomfortable talking to the opposite sex,
right,
and helping them connect to another human being, which at the heart of it is what's really going on there.
Yeah.
And
in many cases,
they talked about NLP a lot. And that's how I got my introduction. Even though I was always into hypnosis, I had never really heard about NLP until them.
Yeah.
In the game, in that book, The Game. And then I went down that road too. Is that where you got your first exposure to it?
Yeah. At the very least, it was concurrent. It was around that time. And I was also, like I said, I was also in the BDSM scene. I was in a relationship with a man who was my boyfriend, my boss, and my dominant. I was working as a professional dominatrix. He owned the place where I worked, and he was really into these sort of NLP, mind control. He was reading like those self-published like J.K. Ellis books and things like that. And he was using operant conditioning as part of his domination of me in ways that I wasn't even really fully aware of until I moved away to Los Angeles and all the trauma boxes fell out of the closet. And I was like, oh, parts of my personality have been programmed. Do I want that anymore? Right.
Right.
Hence the Repatterning Project. Here we are, choose your patterns on purpose, create your personality, in the image of your favorite self, because this is our birthright to do. So yeah, it was some of that scene. He and I got our NLP certifications around the same time. So yeah, yep. Pick up NLP and BDSM, and the dark triad of pick up BDSM.
Yeah. I mean, I've used NLP techniques with hypnosis clients is what I've done over the years. I love using the submodalities, having people, associate things with colors and changing shapes and color. That's had a profound effect on people with phobias. And again, the fast phobia fear technique that's taught in most NLP courses and books, combined with what they call the swish pattern, changing the viewpoint. And so you combine those two things and you can do immense, it looks like magic to me, helping people change their lives.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, speaking of which, I'll plug my buddy Phil Farber. His Brain Magic is just now being re-released, and I was very honored. He asked me to write one of the forewords for it. So yeah, I'll just put that out there for folks who are looking for the specific exercises that are modeled like that with an occult bent, to their teaching. Yeah, Phil Farber's Brain Magic is great with that. I've worked with that too. A lot of what I do and what I teach is less about using the techniques and modalities that I learned in NLP, although I certainly still have those up my sleeve. I got my certifications right on the wall. I know we're not recording video, but you can see them.
A stack of diplomas.
Yeah. But most of what I actually like to teach is about the sort of comprehensive map of the human mind-body learning system, because it's important not just to be able to, I think back to when I was learning NLP and I would kind of, go through the exercises and the visualizations, and I would feel things shift, but it was kind of mysterious to me because I didn't really know how everything had gotten there in the first place. So often what I teach is like, this is how we learn our patterns to begin with. This is how your mind-body learning system works. This is how it develops an internal algorithm based on your experience with the world. You reach out and you touch the hot stove, and if X, then Y, right? If you touch the hot stove, you're going to get burned. If I open my heart to my crush in the middle of the dance floor in 7th grade, I'm going to get rejected, right? But if I punch the school bully, he leaves me alone, right? And then you have someone who grows up and just like punches anytime they have a problem or whatever. So those patterns get set, and we don't realize that they are really arbitrary sets of experiences that if we go back, and this is what timeline therapy is about, which is the sort of NLP. It was developed by Tad James, so it's kind of under the umbrella of NLP. It's a separate certification, which I also have. But Tad James's timeline therapy is what I use the most often, because it's about, let's go back to that original event and let's look at the fact that this was just something that happened to happen to you on this day, and you formed a belief around it. You formed that sort of automated response or program based on what you learned in that moment. But what would have happened if you had different support that day? What would have happened if, how would you have liked that moment to unfold? Can we create a new narrative and install that within your memory, right? And you're not going to actually believe that this new thing happened. You're not quite brainwashing yourself. But what it does is it loosens the grip of the old memory and says, oh, this new one that I have created would have been equally as valid as this old one, because I was a kid probably, and I didn't have control over how the adults around me responded or what kind of support I received or whatever. So this is no more my personality than this other new way of being could be. And I'm going to choose this new way of being on purpose, etc. And the more that you see that, the more that you can for me, repatterning at this point, now that I've been, engaged on this path for as long as I have, I don't really do the visualizations anymore. I don't really do that for myself anyway. I can talk other folks through them, but it's almost like I see it and I'm like, what is the underlying need I'm trying to meet here? Is this actually the best strategy to achieve that? Probably not. What do I want to do on purpose? I'm going to make that conscious. I'm going to choose a strategy for myself now. So it's almost like doing this long enough, you develop that sort of neuroflexibility where you're just like, I'm just going to stop that. I don't want to be doing that anymore. And if I have places where I'm stuck or whatever, honestly, I'll do a sigil on it. It's been some of the most effective, fastest repatterning that I've ever done. It's just like, I don't want to do that anymore. All right, I'm going to cast, I respond to these situations, or like I have all the resources I need, or I do this and that and whatever. I carve that shit on a candle and I light it. And then boom. Either my spirits are going to organize a corrective experience for me, something to overwrite the original trauma of the pattern that got set, or they're going to surround me with people who are going to support this new way of being, joining a new social group. Like, we are wired to avoid ostracism. So we are naturally going to take on the beliefs and patterns of the people around us. Like, our nervous systems are wired to do that. So there's so many different ways. And once people see this, you kind of can't unsee it. So that's when I teach the Repatterning Project. That's the wisdom that I hope to confer. Is it's like, you can use NLP, you can use Phil Farber's brain magic, which, a lot of that is there's a lot of overlap there. You can just decide you're going to get rid of all your friends and join a new peer group because you don't want to be like those people anymore. You can cast a spell, you can orchestrate a corrective peak experience. You can do psychedelics to give you a peak experience of something that is new that can overwrite your trauma, in a safe setting, hopefully with a responsible facilitator. You can do hypnosis. Like, there's a million ways to do that. So for me, it's less about these individual ways, and it's more about empowering people to understand the neurodevelopmental map of the mind-body learning system that we are all like. No one gives us an operator's manual. We were just born. You didn't even get a little pop up on the screen that says, "You sure you want to do that?" Right? So I like to teach people like how their minds and bodies work to take on these patterns. And then once you see that, there's any number of tools you can do to repattern.
I love that. Yeah, I was wired to be like, since I was a kid, to be like, wow, I like Batman too. You got Batman on your shirt. We're friends now.
Right? How you make friends as a boy, right?
That's right.
Well, even still as a grown man.
Yeah. Still, as a grown man, it's usually me listening, and somebody will talk about a ghost or something weird, or you hear intention thrown around a lot now.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I have ideas.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I have lots of ideas. And it's funny too, when people find out I'm a hypnotist, the follow-up questions usually one of two. Is it real, or are you psychic?
Yeah.
I don't know why those are conflated with each other, hypnosis and being psychic, but they seem to be everywhere I go.
That's interesting. I've heard less conflation with hypnosis and psychism, but a conversation that I actually have been having more lately is kind of about the need for more psychism in a lot of mental health spaces, which is a funny thing to say, because psychism is something that has historically been pathologized or written off or fake claimed or whatever, right? And I'm not saying that there have not been charlatans throughout history, right? We're always going to have that.
Sure.
But I just had this really cool conversation with Katie Keach, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And it literally just came out. We're recording this on Saturday, January 24th. And it just came out yesterday on Friday, January 23rd on my podcast, the Repatterning Podcast. It's episode 3. And we were talking about the failure in so many ways for many mental health practitioners, specifically licensed therapists, to kind of take responsibility for a client journey. That there's so many practitioners who are just like, well, how are you feeling today? And, just kind of getting to the end of the hour, going home to their partner and their dog. And the people who are coming to them don't have the outside awareness of why their lives are falling apart. Because when you're in your patterning, and I know because I was in some patterning for quite a long time, you feel like you are making the choices that you need to make to survive, because in some ways you are. That's what you've learned. And to get yourself out of that thinking, which is probably quite calcified by that time, it really takes, like, man, you know, the physical symptoms that I had during my own awakening, shaking, you know, up all night, tossing, turning in bed kind of things, like, you know, my body just writhing, right? The ways that when you finally start to peel back the veil and start to see where you've had all these other options for choices that you haven't been making, it's humbling, it's scary, it's very freeing and liberating anyway, or it was for me. But it was also like, I just came out of that with, why didn't anybody tell me? I was in therapy for years. Did you all see this? And you knew, and you didn't say, Arden, you have CPTSD? You know, you didn't say, which is not even in the DSM, by the way, you know, which is, you know, they didn't catch my autism, my ADHD, like nothing. It's just like, oh, well, how are you feeling? Why don't you want to talk about your week? And so the more that I do this work, the more that I really look at the importance of being able to see things in the client that the client is too embroiled in their own life to see. And that could be through pattern recognition. It doesn't have to be through psychism. I've started with a lot of my clients that I've been working with for a while will now come to me for divination on mental health issues. Where was this pattern first set? Where did I learn this? What is the pattern that is blocking me from XYZ goal that I have? And I'm like, I don't know, let's ask, you know, and if that answer resonates with them, a lot of them practice divination themselves. I'm like, let's do this together. I'll divine on it, you divine on it. Let's find out. Let's keep going until we find something. And for the levels of, I mean, we're at a time where the zeitgeist in this country is like, we're talking about the Epstein files, right? Mm-hmm. And the kind of abuse that quite literally on purpose will be like, the adult is like, I'm going to make sure that you don't remember this, because if you escape this cult and you tell people, then the whole network comes down or whatever. And this is very real. You know, I've gone into this on other episodes, so I won't, but this is not, you know, this is not conspiracy theory, right? There's conspiracy theories out there to discredit all survivors, but right. There's, you know, many facilitators who've worked with survivors of these kinds of abuses, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And what do? You know, I worked with a friend of mine who came to me not as a client, but as making a cry for help, saying, you know, Arden, I'm relapsing. You know, I've been in AA for 10 years, but all of a sudden I'm relapsing every 4 to 6 weeks. And when I come to, I don't even remember what caused the relapse, you know? Mm-hmm. So you're going to need some way to get information, because the client can't get it for themselves if that's what's happening, right? I mean, and believe the client if they share information with you, if they are, right? But oftentimes right. They're coming because they're like, I don't know how to stop this. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why my life didn't end up the way that I wanted it to. I don't know why I keep trying so hard and nothing I'm doing is working. And it's because we are locked into these automated, patterned ways of being that we feel like I'm doing it. I felt like that. I was like, I'm doing everything, but I'm doing everything. I'm doing everything. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. I was only doing the things that I had learned through my patterning and programming. And I was doing too much of them, right? People pleasing, et cetera. All that, you know, thinking that was going to work because it was what I had learned or whatever. So whether it's psychism or I just think that facilitators today need a better, more reliable way of accessing information that is in their client's shadow. Because if your client is coming to you being like, I don't know what's wrong, whatever that is, I'm just going to say, whether it's psychism or something else, like they need to be doing better than they're doing right now. That's
it. When you say psychism, I guess real quick, what specifically are you referencing? Because I don't think everyone would know exactly what that means. So sure. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'll also plug the work of another friend of mine, Matt Oren, wrote a really great book called The Psychic Witch.
Matt
Yeah.
has been on this show 5 times. We
Oh,
love
I
Matt around
knew
here.
you would know that. Yeah. So for anyone who's interested, I think that is probably like one of the best, if not the best book out there right now to help someone develop that kind of a practice.
Yeah.
I would define psychism as pulling information from the ether, from, the Akashic records, or the the 5D, the oversoul, whatever you want to call that you would not have been able to access otherwise. I feel like there is a sort of almost semi-psychism that happens with pattern recognition, and that's for me what I'm really good at. I'm seeing things connect the dots, and I see all of these things happen, but I'm pulling that from these thin slices of information that I already have in the physical, and I'm connecting the dots more quickly than most people would be able to. I've been working at my psychism as well, pulling that, visualize, like having a visual come up in your mind, being able to say, look at a spell and scry it, right? And like I'm looking at a candle that someone sent me a picture of. All right, what is this spell accomplishing? And having something come up in your mind's eye that you can interpret. I've seen work that was done by someone's abuser who was programming them on purpose, right? And seen it was a photo of, it was quite grotesque, keep in mind, this is a person who's abusing people and animals, apparently. It was a bird, the body of a bird kind of like stuffed, and there's bound with pins and whatever. And the facilitator, who also works in that space, had shown this to me, was like, yeah, I came across this photo by, this person who is perpetrating these kind of crimes. And, I said, did you scry it? And they were like, no, I haven't. I don't know if I can. It feels too, like too personal or whatever. They knew something about the situation. And I was like, all right, well, let me try. And what I saw in my mind's eye was like almost like the parting of a Red Sea, like the parting of something splitting. And then I felt myself almost bound, sort of a suffocating kind of a feeling. And I realized, I was like, oh, what happened with this kind of bound dead body of a bird was there was a part of consciousness that was split off. That's something that abusive adults can do. They can learn how to create fragmentation in the consciousness of a person. And it was anchored to this dead body of a bird and pinned and bound. And so you're anchoring the consciousness to an object. And I was able to see that. Hopefully I was, right or what, although I wasn't working on the case. So even if I was wrong, it doesn't matter. But just for my own curiosity, wanting to know what was going on there. But that's the way it appeared to me, as like the parting of a Red Sea, and then the feeling of being bound or suffocated, like a sort of, a stuffing a feeling of tightness in the chest. So that's and then it was funny because after that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. I probably, even with my pattern recognition, should have known what was going on with something, given everything else. But when I was scrying it, I actually had not made those connections yet. So that's how it appeared, the parting of the Red Sea and the feeling of, being bound and stuffed.
That's a lot. Whew.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's like psychism is, you can just tap into that field, put yourself into a trance state, and receive information that you would not be able to receive otherwise. Mm-hmm. That's tough, because then how do you verify it, right? I mean, if you're me, you go to your pendulum, you go to maybe 3 different that's something that, that a lot of my colleagues have said, a reader can be wrong about something. We're not, we're not dismissing the reality of the skill set or the phenomenon to say that, not everyone is wrong. No one bats 1,000, right? Not everyone is right all the time. But if there's something that is really, if there's something that's important to me, for example, if there's something that I've divined on that says, oh yes, this is happening for you, I'll wait till there's like a psychic fair somewhere where you can go and there's like a dozen readers in the room and it's like $20 for a 10-minute reading. And I'll just go around and I'll just be like, is this happening? Yes, no. Okay. And if I get 3 or 4 of them and they're all like, oh yeah, that looks good. That's good odds, you know. The more sources you can have to confirm your information, the better. That's why, like, as a magician, I'm like, I'm still, to this day, I am still skeptical. I'm not skeptical, right? But I feel very, like, I'm discerning because it's important to me that I maintain my integrity and my belief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important point. You know, skepticism being a matter of discernment and your own, you know, autonomy and integrity. It's not just poo-pooing everything.
Absolutely. And you got to be careful too, because there's sometimes, you know, when you can apophenia yourself into an entire narrative and you can see, it's like, oh, I saw 11 on 11 on the clock, so that's my soulmate, right? You know, like the thing that you want to believe you're going to find. And we know this from confirmation bias, which is also something that I teach about in the Repatterning Project. You know, you are going to gravitate toward that which confirms the things that you want to believe already, even if you don't actually want to believe them, even if they are beliefs that were programmed into you by your experiences somehow or another. But now your mind-body system wants to believe them because that helps it to make sense of its worldview and its strategies for surviving, right? So if there's, let's say that I'm someone with like a deeply anxious attachment style. So let's say that's like me in my 20s or whatever. I think that's why when I did start practicing magic, I did have so much skepticism about it because I didn't want to be that person who was like, oh, that's my soulmate because it's 11 on the clock. All of that. So and that's what's funny is when I did start to have that awakening and I started to see those synchronicities and stuff coming up and stuff that I could not explain, I was just like, I'm going crazy. I've been, you know, my whole life I've shied away from that, like, oh, I'm special, or like things are, you know, the universe is divinely aligning for me and whatever. I'm like, no, it's not, man. I got a dumb job I don't like. I got whatever. I got all this trauma. And then all of a sudden, you know, stuff starts happening. And so I was really ruthlessly discerning. And that's why I say, again, those synchronicities popping up in the physical world that I could point to. And I could be like, no, man, I saw this, and I saw this. And people would be like, wow, actually, that is kind of crazy. I'm like, I know, right? To this day, I've got stuff that my spirits are telling me that I've talked to some, you know, a very select amount of friends about. And I'm like, I recognize how delulu this looks, but here's all of the things that I have seen. And I'll share this with Grant and whatever. And Grant's always like, well, yeah, you got to follow that. Like, you got to follow that trail of breadcrumbs if that's what's being presented to you. And, you know, you do it lightly, but that is why they call it the perilous path, right? Is that you have to tread that fine line between my spirits are telling me this huge thing is going to happen for me. I can't get too attached to it because I don't have evidence and confirmed reality yet. But at the same time, I don't want to be skeptical of it and dismiss it and miss it for not believing in it. So you got to walk that fine line where you're like, I am fully prepared for my entire reality to change tomorrow because my spirits tell me that this is going to happen. And I better start prepping my own internal patterning to be able to align with that. In fact, that's probably why they're telling me in advance versus what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong about the whole thing? Am I also willing to let all of that go and admit that these things, this inventory of whatever I actually have in my life right now is the actual reality that I am dealing with and living in? And so walking that fine line, that's why I barely leave my house anymore. It takes so much energy just to ground myself in reality. So
I barely leave my house anymore.
It's true.
Yeah. Synchronicities do play a big part in this if you're paying attention. I mean, this show wouldn't exist if I didn't chase some synchronicities.
Nice.
You know, all those years ago, 2014, I'm at a tarot conference in Dallas. I get a tarot reading from somebody who also does Quimbanda and Chinese sorcery.
Nice.
And she's throwing bones on her, like it's this whole combination of divination techniques. And she starts talking to me about Odin, who's, you know, I'm a heathen primarily. And I'm like, you know, I had some beef with some visions I had. And I was like, I broke up with all that. And she's like, no, you got to get back in and you got to be more open about it. And you got to do all this. So okay, fine. I take the advice. About a week later, I go, oh, fine, I'm in. I go down that rabbit hole and I meet someone who opens up another door, who leads to another person who opens up another door. And then I get gifted a book, Kevin Smith's autobiography,
Nice.
uh, about fat man doing good in life, but half that book is all about how he got into making Clerks and his movies, and the second half is how podcasting saved his life. And I got
Nice.
really interested in podcasts, and then I started looking for those shows, and I found others that I liked, and I'd hear conversations that I was like not happy with. And then I was talking about it with someone, said, "Oh, you got to talk to this other person in this organization that I was looking at. He's an audio engineer. He ends up making all the intro song to my show and
Nice.
teaching me how to run Audacity and teaching me how to find stuff." Like, it was just, these were all events tied to each other from that one tarot reading. I decided to take the advice. And
always follow the divs, man. Always, man.
And you get 10 years of Weird Web Radio.
Yeah. You know, my experience was similar, actually. There was a podcaster. Her name that she went by is Blue of Earth. And she does a very like spiritual, like new agey, very, very new agey, very Burning Man, very, you know, Gaia, all that stuff. And to be honest with you, I don't even necessarily align with the principles that she is teaching, but
Sure.
I watched her and she was so charismatic, and I felt like I heard like from, and I don't know what individual spirit it was or whatever, but I started joking after that. I was like, God told me I need to start a podcast. Like, I heard this message that was like, Arden, you have such valuable information and you're not getting it out there. Yes, you have your course and your graduates do amazing things for themselves. They come back with these crazy, wild, life-changing testimonials. But you're not putting this information out there in a way that can be discovered. You need to start thinking about your delivery. You know, I was watching, like I said, I'm watching this woman and I'm like, she's talking about like polarity, masculine and feminine, which is like, I get so mad about that whole argument or whatever. I just think it's mathematically backwards. But she's talking, I'm like, I don't even believe what she's saying, but I can't stop watching her say it, you know?
Love that. Yes.
Yeah. So that was my call toward embodying my message, not just knowing it intellectually, but can I walk through the world as a living, breathing example of this message? Can I convey it to people in every word that I say and do? And I was like, oh my God, I'm autistic, I'm burned out, I'm like whatever. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll do magic about it. I am a living, walking embodiment of the work that I teach. And here I am. And so to receive that lovely compliment from you that you talked about in the beginning, which, you know, about, you know, the confident way that I speak, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that also is a result of literal magic that I am doing to embody public figurehood around my message. Tomorrow night I'm going to summon the angels of the Ars Almadel again. And one of the things I ask for is I'm like, help me have the confidence and charisma to get this information out there. So it's literally a magical result that you are.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Yes. If you're going to get into this, you might as well do it. Right.
Right.
Oh man, you are a fascinating individual, Arden Leigh.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I enchanted for that.
We are getting near an hour. I do want another question I wanted to ask, I suppose, since we're getting near that point. For someone new, someone listening, just got interested because it's your name or your photo or whatever drug them in, but they're curious about all of this. What would you tell that person? One, a good way to start to get into all this, and two, what's something important you think they should avoid?
What a great question. Well, the way that I started was launching sigils. And I think like there's a lot worse ways that you can go than just diving in, because you are really the universe will start making you take responsibility for the things that you said you want. And the moment that you realize that you have that ability, you start to you're like, oh, now I really got to think about what I want. And you get real intentional about your life. So honestly, I would say that. I mean, listen to my podcast and everything, that might help. but there's really nothing beats casting some sigils, setting some intentions. And to avoid, oh gosh, avoid any teacher that that expects you to go against the things that you are feeling in your body.
Yes.
Which doesn't always mean that all your red flags are gonna, it's not like where there's always smoke, there's fire. But that even if there's not a fire, the smoke is trying to tell you something, whether it's a past pattern of yours. If there's a teacher who makes you feel wrong for feeling that way, that's a problem. That's a big, big problem. Yeah. And also I would say maybe this is a little different than it was 10 years ago, thanks to people like Jason Miller, et cetera, who have, put really good work out online. But one of my big lessons in the beginning was just avoid arguing on the forums, because none of those people are doing, the people who are doing worthwhile magic, are either teaching it to their audience. They're, again, that embodied example, or they're just doing it on their own. You will never waste more time than in a lot of the magic forums where people are just, I did this grimoire, this, or they're just talking about it. They're not really actually doing it. Right. But I would end up getting into these dumb arguments I was just like, why am I here? So yeah, maybe there are better spaces online now than there were 10 years ago, but I guess avoid the path of arguing about things without doing them.
Yes.
That's a big one.
That is a big one. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Like we said, if you're going to get into all of this, do it.
Yeah.
Get in the game. And it is a game. And that one warning, once you light that first candle, you do that first sigil, you do what the spirits notice, and they don't stop noticing. So you're a maid now. You're in the mafia. You're going to have to keep going.
I mean, you can opt out, but why would you want to at that point, right?
Right.
I've seen people opt out, but and that's your free will. But
I have to. I honestly think at this point in my life, I've come to accept I to be mentally well, I need this in my life.
Yep, me too.
I do. I just do. All right. Is there anything that I should have covered you wanted to talk about? Anything I may have missed? Something you want to talk, get in there? Anything at all?
That's a good question. We didn't really talk a lot about narrative magic today, but I have so many other conversations where I've talked about that. But I guess I would say, if anyone's interested in just the idea of writing the things that come true, that is something that I do through my band, Arden and the Wolves. And I've got a lot of music in the queue. I have not released a whole lot in the last several years because I've been in the studio and that hasn't come out yet. But there's some stuff. There's my last EP from 2018, and there's some singles and collabs that I've done with folks. And so if someone is interested in narrative magic, you can my hope also is that with the stuff that is going to be coming out, hopefully a little later this year, you'll also be able to see the sort of magical results too, or you'll be able to hear the stories. So I'll put that out there just for anyone who's interested in looking for it.
No, when you say narrative magic, if you don't mind, we can get into this a little bit. Yeah. Are you talking about hyper sigils?
I am. Well, hyper sigils and sparkling narrative magic, right? It's only a hyper sigil if it comes from the hyper sigil region of France. Other than that, it's just sparkling narrative magic. But
I love that. Yeah, it's like cognac now. No. Yeah. Yeah, I have heard you mention that. I don't know if I saw this on one of your own or videos on YouTube. By the way, Arden has excellent content all over YouTube. Please go check that out. Or you being interviewed, because I've listened to you on Dara's show, The Spirit Box. I heard you on the Mage podcast when I was doing a little bit of research on this show or for this episode. Somewhere you said that you are creating your music, your songs, as a means of basically an auditory sigil. In fact, it's magic.
Yep.
Is the band in on that too?
No, well, it's really a solo project. Like the guys that I play with live, typically don't write the songs with me. I do write songs with some of my producers. I'm always going to write my melody and lyric, and I'll work with different producers to create the track instrumentation that is, whether I pair up with someone and we say, okay, we're going in on this 50-50, you write the music, I'll write my vocal or whatever. Or I come with an idea in mind and I hire a producer and I say, create the track that I want for this particular song, or any various permutation in between. So yeah, they're all really my creation. And I guess Arden and the Wolves has always been a kind of way of saying, like, if you work with me, you're a wolf, like anyone, it could be anyone. It's not just the guys who play the live shows with me, although of course it is them too, but it's really, it's almost like a metaphor for the music industry. You throw me to the wolves and I will come back leading the pack. Like, so my wolves are like everyone in the music industry we're all hungry, hungry like the wolf, So yeah.
Nice.
But I do tell them, like, because I'm crazy, for lack of a better word. So I'll walk in and I'll tell my producer, like, this is what this song needs to do, and that's why I need you to build a track that does this thing, because this is the goal of the song. So this is the emotion that is required to get there. So I'm not secretive about that at all. Nice. Sometimes it happens where I'll just write a song also, and I won't even know what that song was supposed to be for until later stuff shows up, and it's like, oh, my spirits inspired me to write this because they knew that XYZ was going to happen. That's been a wild ride too.
Interesting. Are you layering into the magic, I suppose, when you're songwriting for the benefit of listeners too? To evoke something for them or in them?
I honestly think that the best way that we can do that is to focus entirely on our own experience. It's one of those things where, gosh, the metaphor that comes to mind is sex. Honestly, it's like one of those things where if you're trying too hard to please the other person, it actually comes off. Yeah. Whereas if you're immersing in it and you're feeling it, like, the thing that I do for the listeners is to go on that journey myself, fully committed, which means that I can't be worrying about what other people are thinking of me. So I'm doing it entirely for myself. But then when I come out the other side, I'm like, hey guys, I did this. I got through it. Here's how I got through it. And so maybe me explaining it after the fact is for the sake of the listeners. But I think that's the best we can do. Again, is I really, truly think as artists that the best thing that we can do for the collective is to go on our own journeys and transmute things, because that's how we're going to inspire other. No one wants to sit there like I'm, like me being like a motivational speaker as a singer, like, hey guys, you should all, like what they want to see is that hero's journey, like that bravery, that like, oh, wow, they did it. That gives me hope that I can do it too. So I guess that's the one thing that I do feel. I just recorded a podcast that's going to come out on mine in a little bit with Dr. Jamie Marich, who is not only a licensed therapist, but also teaches the expressive arts, right? Using creativity as a way of healing trauma. And I one of the things I said was that I feel a responsibility that in my art, if I'm going to complain about something, I better be prepared to come up with a solution. I better not just wallow in my pain, wah, bad things happen to me, blah, blah, blah. I can name those things and say bad things happened to me. That was fucked up. Now, how am I going to get justice? How am I going to heal myself? How am I going to right this wrong? And that's the journey that I think is exciting for people to see.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The way you said that, in my mind, the way my mind works, I visualize a book appeared in my brain, like nice. the back of a spell book, your typical, like, how do I get justice? How do I beat the court case? How do I curse or hex my enemy? How do I heal? How do I find love? How do I love myself? How do I get this skill? Like, how do I open these roads? How do I go on that journey? Your literally just kind of described trauma as a grimoire in a way. That was cool.
Oh, thank you.
That's how my brain took it.
That's lovely. That is an excellent visual.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take the rest of this conversation to Patreon so we can get real weird. You don't know what you're getting into yet. Just remember you agreed. No,
I did.
You did. All right. Where can people find you?
Well, my website is therepatterningproject.com, and you can look up the Repatterning podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Of course, if you want to see the video version, go to my YouTube, and just the Repatterning podcast. And my band Arden and the Wolves is pretty much everywhere that you can listen to music. And I'm also on Instagram. I've got 3 Instagram accounts. So I've got my personal account, which is It's Me, Arden Leigh. I've got the Repatterning Project, and I've also got Arden and the Wolves. And those are all the usernames that they are, all one word, lowercase letters, etc.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was an excellent time. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, same. Thank you again for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you. For everyone listening, please do go check out all of Arden's stuff. I've just doing research for the show, found myself consuming a lot of Arden's content. It's excellent. Thank you, as always, for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode or any other, please share it amongst your friends, your family, your networks, social media, anywhere you can get the word out and help drive people to come check it out. I appreciate your ears. I appreciate your time. Go have wonderful musical and magical lives, and stay weird out there, my friends. Okay. Arden Leigh, it is bonus audio time. Are you ready?
I am. Or if I'm not, I guess I better be. All I know till you ask the question.
Yeah. Welcome to Weird Web Radio Patreon. I am your host, Lonnie Scott. Now, first question is always the same for everyone.
All right.
What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit, and why?
Ooh.
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions, magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.